a Facebook profile with recent activity, bearing the same face, the same name, the same birthday. 18 years after her son vanished in Central Park without a trace, Margaret Collins stared at her screen in disbelief as tears streamed down her face. The profile showed photos dated just 3 weeks ago. Central Park, New York City. Michael Collins, 19, college sophomore at NYU, found by a stranger browsing social media who recognized his face from an old missing persons documentary. Michael had been a promising student, studying computer science with dreams of working in Silicon Valley. Every morning, he would jog through Central Park at exactly 5:30 a.m. before his classes, rain or shine. His roommates described him as disciplined, brilliant, and kind, the type who would leave coffee brewing for everyone. On the morning of October 12, 2005, Michael left for his usual run, but never returned to his dorm. His phone, wallet, and laptop remained untouched on his desk. His mother, Margaret, a single parent who had worked 2 jobs to put him through college, collapsed when she received the call from campus police. "My Michael would never leave without saying goodbye," she insisted, through tears to anyone who would listen. The search parties combed every inch of the 843-acre park for weeks. Posters with his smiling face plastered across Manhattan gradually weathered away, just as public interest in the case slowly faded. The initial investigation revealed nothing suspicious in Michael's background. No drugs, no concerning relationships, no financial troubles. Security cameras had captured him entering the park that morning, wearing his usual gray NYU hoodie and black running shorts. The last ping from his fitness watch came at 5:47 a.m. near the Ramble, a densely wooded area. And then, nothing, as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Police dogs lost his scent near the boathouse. Ground-penetrating radar found nothing in the areas where the soil had been recently disturbed. Divers searched the lake multiple times. The case eventually went cold, filed away as one of New York's many unsolved mysteries. For 18 years, Margaret Collins never stopped searching. She mortgaged her house to hire private investigators. She appeared on true crime shows. She learned how to use social media just to keep Michael's story alive. Every October 12th, she would sit on the same bench where Michael liked to rest during his runs, hoping for a miracle that never came. Until now. The Facebook profile showed a man in his late 30s, with Michael's distinctive cleft chin and hazel eyes. The account belonged to a Mike Collins living in Seattle, working as a software engineer. It had been created just 9 months ago, with photos showing hiking trips, a modest apartment, and a golden retriever. But there were no childhood photos, no college memories, no posts older than the account itself. Was this really her son? Or was it a cruel coincidence? The profile had only 17 friends, all seemingly new acquaintances. Why would someone disappear for 18 years, only to resurface so publicly? And if this wasn't Michael, who was this doppelganger who shared so many of her son's features? A closer examination of the profile revealed something even more baffling. Among the sparse collection of photos was one that showed Mike wearing a watch, a vintage Seiko with a distinctive scratch on the face. Margaret's hands trembled as she zoomed in on the image. She recognized that watch immediately. It had belonged to Michael's father, who had died when Michael was just 7 years old. It was one of the few mementos he had left behind, and Michael had treasured it, wearing it only on special occasions. This couldn't be a coincidence. This had to be him. With shaking hands, Margaret sent a friend request and a simple message. "Michael, is that you?" For 3 days she barely ate or slept, checking her phone obsessively for a response that didn't come. The friend request remained unanswered. On the 4th day, just as she was beginning to lose hope again, Margaret noticed something that sent chills down her spine. The profile had been deleted. Every trace of Mike Collins had vanished from Facebook as suddenly as Michael had disappeared from Central Park 18 years ago. Was this an admission? Had she scared him off? Or was someone playing an unimaginably cruel joke? Desperate for answers, Margaret contacted the NYPD Cold Case Unit. Detective Liam Rodriguez, a veteran investigator who had not been involved in the original case, agreed to look into the Facebook profile. Using the screenshots Margaret had wisely taken before the profile disappeared, he began the process of obtaining a warrant to request IP information from Facebook. "Technology has come a long way since 2005, he explained to Margaret. If this person accessed the account from the same location consistently, we might be able to narrow down where they are, or were. While waiting for the legal process to unfold, Margaret couldn't sit idle. She hired a private investigator named Diana Chen, who specialized in digital forensics. Social media leaves breadcrumbs, Diana explained. Even deleted accounts can leave traces. Using reverse image search technology, Diana discovered that one of the photos from the Facebook profile, a picture of Mike standing in front of the Space Needle, had appeared briefly on a Seattle tech company's website in a section showcasing their employees. The company, Horizon Solutions, had removed the image from their site the same day the Facebook profile was deleted. Could this be where Michael was working? Or was this another dead end in an increasingly bizarre case? Detective Rodriguez managed to get in touch with Horizon Solutions. The company confirmed they had hired a Mike Collins 8 months ago, but he had abruptly resigned via email the day after Margaret sent the friend request. His resignation letter cited personal reasons and requested that his final paycheck be donated to a homeless shelter. The company had limited personal information. He had worked remotely, joining video meetings with his camera off and off, citing poor internet connection. His employment verification had checked out with a social security number and references that seemed legitimate at first glance. But when Rodriguez dug deeper, he discovered that the social security number belonged to a Michael Collins, who had died in 1983, decades before their Michael was even born. Meanwhile, Diana uncovered something equally disturbing. Using facial recognition software on the Facebook photos, she found a 79% match with Michael's missing person photos, high enough to suggest the same person, but with enough discrepancy to indicate aging or possible subtle alterations. But she also found a driver's license issued in Oregon under the name Matthew Cooper, with an almost identical face. This license had been issued in 2010, 5 years after Michael's disappearance. Had Michael created a new identity? And if so, why? What had happened in Central Park that morning that would make a normal college student abandon his promising future, his loving mother, his entire existence? Margaret's mind raced with possibilities, each more troubling than the last. Had Michael witnessed something he shouldn't have? Had he been involved in something dangerous? Or had he simply chosen to walk away from his life? The thought that hurt the most was that he might have been living a new life all these years, knowing his mother was suffering and choosing not to contact her. "I just want to know he's alive," she told Detective Rodriguez, her voice breaking. "I won't interfere with his new life if that's what he wants. I just need to know." The investigation took an unexpected turn when Rodriguez received a call from a detective in Portland, Oregon. Matthew Cooper had been involved in a minor traffic accident in 2011, and his fingerprints had been taken as part of standard procedure. Those prints had remained in the system, and when Rodriguez ran them against Michael's prints from his college ID application, they matched. Michael Collins and Matthew Cooper were definitively the same person. But the Portland detective had more to share. Matthew Cooper had left Oregon in 2015, telling neighbors he was moving to Europe. His trail went cold after that, until the appearance of Mike Collins in Seattle nearly a decade later. What had he been doing in those missing years? And why the return to a variation of his original name? As news of the investigation spread, a former park maintenance worker named Carlos Vasquez came forward with information he had never shared before. On the morning of Michael's disappearance in 2005, Carlos had been clearing trash near the Ramble when he saw a young man matching Michael's description in an intense conversation with an older man in an expensive suit. "They weren't shouting, but I could tell it was serious," Carlos said. "The younger guy looked scared. I thought maybe it was a father and son arguing, so I kept my distance. Later, when I saw the missing posters, I recognized the face, but I was undocumented at the time and afraid to talk to police." Carlos couldn't identify the older man, but remembered he had a distinctive scar above his right eyebrow. This new lead sent Rodriguez digging through security footage from nearby buildings, most of which had long been erased or overwritten. But in an incredible stroke of luck, a prestigious law firm on the edge of the park had maintained digital archives of their security feeds for insurance purposes. After obtaining a warrant, Rodriguez spent days going through grainy footage from that morning in 2005. And there it was. At 6:02 a.m., a figure in a grey hoodie could be seen walking rapidly away from the park, accompanied by an older man in a dark suit. The footage was too blurry to make out faces clearly, but the body language suggested the younger man was not being forced or coerced. They got into a black sedan with tinted windows and drove away. The law firm's footage wasn't clear enough to capture the license plate, but it did show the distinctive logo of a high-end car service on the vehicle's door. The company, Executive Transport, was still in operation, and their records showed a pickup at that location ordered by someone named Howard Prescott. The name immediately raised red flags for Rodriguez. Howard Prescott had been a powerful investment banker who died in 2019, but in 2005, he had been under federal investigation for financial crimes involving a massive Ponzi scheme. The investigation had stalled when key witnesses either recanted their testimonies or disappeared. Could Michael have been connected to this somehow? Rodriguez discovered that Michael had briefly worked part-time in the IT department at Prescott's firm during his freshman year, a detail that had been overlooked in the original investigation. The job had been arranged through an NYU alumni program and seemed insignificant at the time. But what if Michael had seen something during his time there, accessed files he wasn't supposed to see, overheard conversations that implicated Prescott? What if he had evidence that could have brought down one of the most powerful men on Wall Street? Diana's digital archaeology uncovered something else. Before his disappearance, Michael had accessed a secure file server at the investment firm using his student credentials. The access logs had been buried deep in archived data, but they showed that just 3 days before he vanished, Michael had downloaded several large files from a protected directory related to offshore accounts. The next day, he had made a series of unusual cash withdrawals totaling just under $10,000, the threshold that would trigger automatic reporting to financial authorities. The pieces were starting to fit together. Michael had likely stumbled upon evidence of Prescott's financial crimes. Perhaps he had confronted Prescott or threatened to expose him. But instead of silencing Michael permanently, Prescott had offered him a deal: disappear with enough cash to start a new life or face the consequences. For a scared 19-year-old, faced with threats from a powerful man with countless resources and connections, running might have seemed like the only option. But why resurface now after all these years? What had changed? The answer came from an unexpected source: Howard Prescott's will, which had become public after his death. Among the standard bequests to family members and charitable foundations was a puzzling entry: a trust fund of $5 million to be paid to a consulting firm called MC Solutions, with the stipulation that the funds be released only after specific legal documents were unsealed in 2023. Rodriguez quickly confirmed that MC Solutions had been registered in Washington state just 3 months before the Facebook profile appeared. The registration listed Mike Collins as the sole proprietor. It seemed that even from the grave, Prescott was making payments, perhaps for continued silence or as the final installment of their original arrangement. With Prescott dead and the statute of limitations expired on most of his financial crimes, perhaps Michael felt it was finally safe to reclaim some version of his identity, not knowing that his mother had never stopped searching. That facial recognition technology had advanced so significantly that his brief digital footprint would be enough to unravel his carefully constructed disappearance. As Rodriguez and Diana presented their findings to Margaret, she sat in stunned silence, trying to process the reality that her son had chosen to disappear, that he had been alive all these years while she mourned him. The pain of betrayal mingled with the overwhelming relief that he wasn't dead. "Should we try to find him again?" Rodriguez asked gently. "Now that we know roughly where he was, we could canvass Seattle, check transportation records." "No," Margaret said finally, her voice steady despite her tears. "He's run twice now. He obviously doesn't want to be found." She took a deep breath. "But I want him to know something. Can you help me with that?" With Rodriguez's assistance, Margaret recorded a simple video message. "Michael, I know now that you're alive, and I understand you must have had your reasons for leaving. I won't try to find you again, but I want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you, and I always will. If you ever want to come home, even just for a visit, even just for a phone call, I'll be here. No questions asked. You're still my miracle." The video was posted on all of Margaret's social media accounts, shared thousands of times by sympathetic strangers, and eventually picked up by national news outlets. If Michael was watching from wherever he was hiding, he would see it. 3 months passed with no response. Margaret tried to make peace with the situation, telling herself that at least now she had the comfort of knowing her son was alive. She returned to her routines, to her job as a high school counselor, to her life, changed, but moving forward. And then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, a small package arrived at her door. Inside was the old Seiko watch that had belonged to Michael's father, along with a handwritten note. "I'm sorry for everything. Forgive me. I'm safe." There was no return address, no way to respond. But for Margaret it was enough, a confirmation, a connection, perhaps even the beginning of a reconciliation. The case of Michael Collins remains officially classified as resolved in NYPD records, though the full truth of what happened that morning in Central Park, and in the 18 years that followed, may never be completely known. Some questions linger. Was Prescott the only one involved, or were there others? What exactly did Michael discover, and does he still have evidence that could implicate others? What identities has he lived under during the missing years between Oregon and Washington? But perhaps the most haunting question is one of morality rather than fact. In choosing self-preservation over truth, did Michael make an understandable choice or an unforgivable one? For Margaret Collins, the answer seems clear. On her desk now sits a framed photo of Michael from his high school graduation, and beside it, in a small glass display case, his father's watch, a symbol of absence transformed into a token of connection. She has started a support group for families of missing persons, sharing her unique perspective as someone who found answers after nearly 2 decades of searching. Closure comes in many forms, she often tells them. Sometimes it's not the ending you hoped for, but it's still an ending that allows you to move forward. Meanwhile, somewhere in the world, a man who was once Michael Collins continues his life under yet another new identity, carrying the burden of his choices and the knowledge that, despite everything, he is still loved and would be welcomed home. As one chapter ends, another begins, both for Margaret, learning to live with a bittersweet truth, and for Michael, perhaps watching from afar, perhaps wondering if he made the right choice, perhaps someday finding the courage to reach out again. The story of Michael Collins is more than a mystery solved. It's a window into the complex nature of disappearance in the modern world, how technology can both facilitate vanishing and make it nearly impossible to remain hidden forever. It raises difficult questions about the lengths people will go to protect themselves, the endurance of a mother's love, and the possibility of redemption after years of deception. In an age when our digital footprints follow us everywhere, can anyone truly disappear? Or will the human connections we leave behind eventually pull us back into the lives we abandoned? And for those of us following this story, it prompts a deeply personal reflection. If someone you loved disappeared by choice, could you forgive them for the years of grief they caused you? Or would the relief of finding them alive be enough to heal the wound of their abandonment? This case, with its unexpected twists and complicated emotions, reminds us that behind every missing person poster is a web of human relationships, disrupted and damaged by absence. It shows us that even in the most puzzling disappearances, the truth may be hiding in plain sight, sometimes in the form of a Facebook profile that appears 18 years too late, sometimes in the quiet courage of a mother who never stopped searching, sometimes in a vintage watch returned as a token of remorse and remembrance. For Margaret Collins, the search is over. For the rest of us, the questions linger. And somewhere out there, a man who erased himself is perhaps reading these very words, wondering if he will ever find the courage to come home, or if some secrets are better left buried in the past, like memories fading in the morning mist of Central Park on an autumn day so many years ago. Investigative journalists and amateur sleuths continue to debate the case online. Some believe there must be more to the story. Perhaps Michael was recruited by a government agency or entered witness protection. Others speculate that Prescott's financial crimes were connected to even darker activities, explaining why Michael felt he needed to disappear so completely. But unless Michael himself decides to tell his story someday, these theories remain just that. Theories, whispers, possibilities floating in the digital ether where Michael briefly reappeared before vanishing once again. What we know for certain is this. On October 12, 2005, a young man with a bright future walked into Central Park and chose, or was compelled, to leave his life behind. 18 years later, a mother's unrelenting love and the inexorable advance of technology brought his secret life momentarily into the light, and in that brief illumination, 2 broken lives touched across the darkness. Not enough to make them whole again, perhaps, but enough to offer a measure of peace, The discovery of the Facebook profile may have solved the central mystery of Michael's disappearance, but it opened a Pandora's box of new questions. What was in those files he downloaded from Prescott's servers? Did he use that information to negotiate his escape, or has he been holding it all these years as insurance? Why did he choose Seattle for his re-emergence, and was he planning to establish a permanent identity there before Margaret found him? The answers to these questions may never come to light, lost in the deliberate gaps of a life carefully erased and partially rewritten. For Detective Rodriguez, the case represents both a triumph and a frustration. In 23 years on the force, I've never seen anything quite like this, he admitted in his final report. Usually, when someone disappears for this long, we're looking for remains, not navigating financial conspiracies and multiple identities. Part of me wants to keep pulling on the threads, see where they lead, but another part respects that this family has been through enough. Sometimes solving the mystery doesn't mean answering every question. Diana Chen, the digital forensics specialist, sees the case as a cautionary tale about privacy in the digital age. Even with all his precautions, minimal social media, remote work, multiple identity changes, he couldn't stay hidden once he connected to his past. We leave digital fingerprints everywhere now. True anonymity is almost impossible to maintain long-term. She's turned Michael's case into an anonymized case study for her cybersecurity classes, teaching students about the permanence of digital footprints. In the years since Michael's disappearance was resolved, Margaret has found purpose in her pain. The support group she founded, Finding Peace, has chapters in 12 cities now. She's become an advocate for better resources for families of missing adults and has lobbied for legislation to improve coordination between law enforcement agencies in missing persons cases. Even when the outcome isn't what you hoped for, she says, knowing is better than wondering. The not knowing is what destroys you day by day. And what of Michael himself? The last confirmed sighting was a security camera in a Seattle bus terminal 3 days after his Facebook profile was discovered. A man with a backpack and a baseball cap pulled low, buying a ticket with cash. The image quality isn't good enough for positive identification, but the height and build match. The ticket was for Vancouver, but whether he actually went there or used it as a misdirection is unknown. Canadian authorities have no record of anyone matching his description or known aliases crossing the border during that time period. Some who follow the case believe he started yet another life, perhaps in Europe or Asia, places where he could more easily blend in as an American expatriate with few questions asked about his past. Others think he may have returned to New York, hiding in plain sight in the anonymity of the big city, perhaps even walking through Central Park on autumn mornings, retracing the steps that changed the course of his life. A few hopeful souls suggest that one day when he feels truly safe, he might contact Margaret again, not just with a watch and a note, but with his presence, his voice, his story. The truth likely lies somewhere between these possibilities, in the shadowed spaces where a man who erased himself moves through the world, carrying the weight of his secrets and the echo of his mother's unconditional forgiveness. Perhaps he finds moments of peace, knowing she no longer lies awake, wondering if he's dead or alive. Perhaps he still looks over his shoulder, uncertain if Prescott's reach extends beyond the grave through associates who might still have reason to fear what Michael knows. Perhaps he has built a life with moments of joy and connection, or perhaps he lives in a state of perpetual transience, never allowing himself to form the bonds that might once again be severed by the need to run. In the end, the case of Michael Collins is as much about what remains unknown as what has been discovered. It's about the spaces between facts where truth and meaning reside. It's about the power of a mother's love to transcend betrayal and absence. It's about the impossible choices people make when faced with danger, and the ripple effects those choices create across lives and years. For those who hear this story, it inevitably provokes reflection. Would you have the strength to forgive someone who let you believe they were dead for 18 years? Would you have the courage to send that watch back, that brief acknowledgement, knowing it might reopen wounds barely healed? And perhaps most disturbingly, under the right circumstances, might any of us be capable of walking away from everything and everyone we know, starting over as someone new, leaving behind a wake of grief and unanswered questions? These are questions without easy answers, echoing in the space between what we know of Michael's story and what remains hidden. They remind us that even the most ordinary lives can contain extraordinary secrets, that the people closest to us may harbor depths we never fully fathom, and that sometimes the most profound act of love is simply letting go. As this narrative comes to a close, Margaret Collins continues her quiet life in the same apartment where she raised her son, where she waited for 18 years for answers, where she finally found a measure of peace. The watch sits in its case on her desk, its hands frozen at the moment its battery died, 1:17, though whether AM or PM is impossible to tell. Sometimes she takes it out and winds it, listening to the soft mechanical ticking that was once the soundtrack to her husband's life, then her son's, and now her own private reminder that time moves forward, even when it seems to stand still. And somewhere in the world, Michael Collins, or whatever name he goes by now, continues his journey, carrying with him the knowledge that he is both lost and found, both missing and discovered, both forgiven and still seeking redemption. Perhaps someday his path will lead him home, or perhaps the true conclusion to this story is yet to be written, waiting in the future for another unexpected Facebook profile, another chance encounter, another moment when past and present collide in ways no one could predict. Until then, this remains a story suspended between resolution and mystery, between forgiveness and regret, between the profound human need for answers and the complex reality that some questions may never be fully answered. It's a story that reminds us that disappearance is never simple, that identity is fragile and malleable, and that even in an age of digital footprints and facial recognition, the human heart remains the most uncharted territory of all. For now we leave Margaret with her watch and her memories, Michael with his secrets and his freedom, and all of us with the unsettling awareness that sometimes the line between staying and leaving, between honesty and self-preservation, between love and fear is thinner than we might like to believe. And as we go about our own lives, passing strangers on the street who carry histories we will never know, we might pause to wonder how many other Michael Collinses are out there, living quietly among us, waiting for the day when they too might find the courage to send back a watch, a note, a piece of themselves that says, "I was here, I am sorry, I am alive." Do you believe that Michael made the right choice in disappearing, or should he have trusted the authorities to protect him from whatever threats Prescott made? And would you be able to forgive a loved one who let you believe they were dead for 18 years?